My question for the at-issue panel.
This is my question for the at-issue panel.
My question for the at-issue panel is...
My question for the at-issue panel.
My question for the at-issue panel is...
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 We put out a call and you guys delivered. So tonight we are going to answer some of your questions, some of the viewer questions that you sent in. Althea, Paul, Chantal, and Andrew all here with me in studio in Toronto. And this handy dandy prop that our producers have come up with. You know that I do at-issue roulette. We're so high-tech here at the CBC. So that's how I'll determine who gets to answer the first question. And the first question comes from Sarah Stroder in Yellowknife.
My question for the at-issue panel is, have we already seen what will become the main ballot box issue for the election, or is it yet to come?
All right, I'm spinning it. I'm really doing that. It might take too long, so I'm only going to do it once. Andrew, the issue for the next election, do we know it, or is it yet to come?
We don't know it. I'm not sure it is yet to come because I actually reject the whole idea of there being a ballot box issue. This is something that we in the media get sucked into because the parties definitely have their preferred ballot box issue and they try to imprint it upon our brains. But there's 17 million voters out there and each of them has their own ballot box issue.
But is it not true that things get galvanized a little bit and everyone starts to talk about this?
Yes, but you've got, regardless of specific issues, you've got trends. For instance, I don't believe that this will be an election where change or the move for change will be a huge factor, not like Ontario and Quebec, because this is a government that only has had one term. But beyond that, competence comes into play. And once you've looked at all the issues, the question will be, who do I trust to be Prime Minister? And that is the question that comes back in every election.
That's smart, Paul.
I suspect we actually have seen the issue that will drive most of the decisions of undecided voters in the next election. We just don't know what it is yet. It's like an Agatha Christie novel. Will it be Professor Climate Change? Will it be Miss Migration? Will it be Dr. Affordability? Stay tuned for the last act when Hercule Poirot will reveal everything.
That's such a small sliver of the vote is people who are choosing between the Conservatives and the Liberals. Lots of people are going to vote NDP, not even wanting them to be the government.
Right.
People have a million different reasons for voting.
Yeah.
I agree with Chantal. I think trust and competence is really what's going to be at stake in the election. I also think there can be side issues like migration, like climate change, like guns. Even electoral reform for some people might speak to trust and competence. Can you trust Justin Trudeau if he broke his promise the last time? There may also be things that we don't see come on the horizon. Like, there's now talk that we might see a global recession coming in the later stages of 2019. Well, that changes the tone about maybe people didn't really care about deficits, but maybe they will start caring about deficits and debt a little bit more strongly than they do.
It also depends. It also depends, I think, probably on where you live too for all of those issues. Okay,
course.
next question is I'm going to spin it as I'm watching because otherwise it'll take too long. Travis Mitchell in Brampton, Ontario. Go ahead, Travis.
My question for the at-issue panel is how much disruption is the PPC likely to cause in the next election and for the Conservative Party in particular?
So I'll go to you, Chantal. You came up on my spinner.
We don't know is the short answer. It's too early to tell for sure. Maxime Bernier is mostly fishing in Conservative waters, which is unnerving for the Conservatives. He's doing well in those waters in places like Saskatchewan and Alberta, where there is not a lot of destruction that he can wreak on the Conservatives because they have such a wide base. So the real question is, to me, will he be a factor in Ontario, where the battle will be competitive and will go a long way to determine whether it's a majority, a minority, a Liberal or a Conservative government? And if he is a factor in Ontario, that will be bad news for Andrew Scheer.
What do you think, Andrew?
I suspect more than perhaps we might estimate at this time. And I say that by looking at the Conservatives' body language. In the last few weeks, Scheer has been taking positions on, for example, sort of targeting the media, which he then backed away from a little bit, particularly on the Global Migration Pact, which was this issue from the fever swamp of the right-wing blogosphere. That looks like a party that's worried about that he might make inroads in, and they're trying to cover that off.
I 100% agree with what Andrew just said. I think the fact that Andrew Scheer came out and took such a decisive stand on the global migration comeback, which really was not anything that people at the grocery store seem to be talking about, but there was a move and MPs' offices were being bombarded from calls. It was on social media channels. And Maxime Bernier was going to rallies and saying, I'm the only political party that's willing to stand up on this issue. The Conservatives are not willing to do this. And they took that away from him. They would not have done that if they did not feel that they were creating a wedge issue between themselves and Mr. Bernier. So I do think they are a little bit worried about maybe that their people won't be as mobilized to come out to the polls. More of that than really that he's going to capture, that 1% of polls or maybe 2 or 3 that is going to really impact their chances in the next election.
Mr. Wells.
I'd be real surprised if the margin of Liberal victory over the Conservatives in the next election, if that's how it ends up, is smaller than the vote of Maxime Bernier's party. In other words, I'll be real surprised if Maxime Bernier by himself is enough to lose this election for the Conservatives. So Conservatives are going to win despite him, or they're going to lose, and he wouldn't have helped if he'd stayed on board. But one of the things Conservatives have to do in the interim, like I can't predict their behavior next September, but right now, they need to act like the party that Maxime Bernier voters can come back home to if they give up on Bernier. So they can't denigrate the party or its members or their choices, and they have to sound at least halfway acceptable on some of their issues.
Why though? Because a lot of those people don't seem like they actually voted.
Well,
in the last election.
Alfie, it's on a list of things that a complex party has to do in complex times. They also have to take Liberal votes. They also have to appeal to orange-blue switchers in Saskatchewan. They got to do a million things.
Yes,
but this is on the list of things they got to do.
But to remain attractive to a Conservative fringe, because it is mostly that, they are going to be losing the votes that they need from the Liberals that they need to pull out. And at some point,
I heard people say that about Stephen Harper 4 campaigns in a row.
Okay, let's move on. Let's move on to question 3. We'll agree to disagree on that one. Michael Saad in Colehurst, Alberta, asks this.
Hi, I'm Mike from Colehurst, Alberta, Canada. My question for the At Issue panel is, what, in the panel's opinion, is the biggest threat facing Canadian unity and federalism heading into 2019?
Okay, Althea, you.
Well, he's from Alberta, and I think really right now that's where most of the fervor that's anti-federation seems to be coming from. There is no huge threat coming from Quebec. I think there's no real threat coming from Alberta either, but I think there's a lot of disenchantment, and that speaks to a lot of what Rachel Notley is doing, and certainly for what Jason Kenney is doing as well.
It's going to be very difficult for whoever is Prime Minister to reconcile Alberta's expectations on the pipeline development front and the resistance in places like Quebec and BC. And that could lead to a fairly acrimonious time. It already is at this point.
Well, and you were at the First Minister's meeting, Paul, this year, and that was apparent that it wasn't just one place that the Prime Minister is having trouble with. It's different places for different reasons, and some of them starting to gang up on him.
Yeah, I mean, so to riff on the viewer's question, it's becoming increasingly clear, if it was not already clear, that Quebec is not a short-term threat to national unity. François Legault is not interested in playing that game, and everyone's trying to be his friend. The extent to which Alberta is a real threat, I expect there's going to be a lot of heat around these same issues by next summer, because there's a very good chance that Jason Kenney, who's a superb political operator, these are all his issues, and he's going to be looking to demonstrate that he can make a difference. He's going to be in the equation. I'll be really curious to see if Jason Kenney can be more effectual on these issues than Rachel Notley has. We'll find out.
Well, he certainly will be probably louder. I would say he's better at taking up space. That she is doing that, but I would argue
more combative, but maybe less constructive.
Yeah, maybe.
He's coming there. He will absolutely be coming with his boxing gloves on. Look, Alberta's a very angry place right now. If it turns out that we are unable to get a pipeline built, if people in Alberta are told, sorry, your oil is just going to be shut in because the federal government can't exercise its responsibilities and get interprovincial infrastructure built, even aside from the economic impact of that, I just think the symbolism of it and what it says about Alberta's place in the Federation would be absolutely lethal.
Yeah, that's dangerous.
There are Liberals who are still hoping in the timeline that they can get shovels back in the ground for the Trans Mountain expansion when the construction season resumes. Whether that's optimistic, wishful thinking, I can't tell you, but they are still hoping to campaign against the background of shovels in the ground.
But they are up against the reality that they have to do this meaningful consultation with First Nations, and if First Nations say, we need more time, I don't know how they get around that.
The shovels in the ground, by the way, will not save them in Alberta.
No,
but it will.
I wasn't
it sends a signal.
I wasn't suggesting
that,
but it will be a more positive situation than it is now. And the courts did suggest it need not be a lengthy process.
That's right.
Okay, we have a question from a young journalist starting his career in Minnesota, of all places. His question is about the rhetoric of the U.S. president toward journalists. Here he is.
I wonder how the rhetoric is viewed in Canada and how that is seen from there and what it means for covering politics.
And that is Alex Wieneman in Minnesota. You want to start, Paul?
At a minimum, when the president calls the press the enemies of the people, it makes me sad. And it does make me worry for a lot of my colleagues down there who I think are in real danger of physical attack from people who take these things the wrong way. I also think that this is, to some extent, the scapegoating of journalists is kind of an eternal thing that journalists have to face. I mean, my first couple of weeks as a reporter for the Montreal Gazette, I covered some demonstration by truckers in the middle of nowhere in Quebec, and some guy came real close to knocking my block off because he was mad about reporters. Mm-hmm. But it's the sort of thing that people in positions of responsibility should not provoke through their words and actions. Unfortunately, right now, the presidency of the United States is not a position of responsibility.
Do we see that, those percolating in any way? I know you alluded to the little moment where Andrew Scheer thought, maybe I'm going to go down this road and then didn't. But do we see it percolating here, that kind of rhetoric?
Every once in a while, the Conservatives will send a fundraising note saying that the Liberal media in Ottawa is against them. But we have not seen at all, and I do not think we will see from the Conservatives the type of language that we see from the President of the United States, which is a good thing. I think the Prime Minister and the Liberals have kind of, like they tend to do with many issues, kind of overreach sometimes to try to make a point. Yeah. And they are trying to make journalism and journalists kind of another one of these wedge issues that places them against Donald Trump. Yeah. And I think a lot of reporters, especially in Ottawa, are very uncomfortable with their play on that.
That actually goes back to Paul's issue about values, trying to suggest that journalism, democracy, accountability is a liberal value.
Yeah, I mean, the Conservatives have always complained about not getting a fair shake from the media, and with some justice. The media does lean left. But this is entered an entirely different territory of outright demonization, of not just skepticism about the media, which is well warranted. Mm-hmm. We get a lot of things wrong, but just blind rejectionism of everything that the media says must be wrong. I think in the Trump populist case, it's part of a broader rejection of knowledge and of elites and people who know stuff. So we're just one part of that. But it becomes particularly toxic, as Paul said, when political leaders, not just Trump, but others, are kind of leading the chant and making the press out to be not a flawed but necessary vehicle in democracy, but the enemy of the people. That has gone, way over the line.
Yeah, last word to you.
And I have seen so far no evidence that the serious Conservatives were indulging in that kind of language. When one of them does, if that happens, I'll decide that person is not a serious, responsible politician.
Okay. Don't write me for these at-issue roulette things. I can't get you one. This is a custom-made, one-of-a-kind thing. I can't even give it to you guys. Thank you all. Appreciate you being here. Andrew, Chantal, Althea, and Paul.